All right, hi everyone. Welcome to chapter 3 on data visualization. This chapter is going to be a little bit longer than chapter 2, and that's because uh, it's great that we do all this transformation of data and we know what it means, but we have to get that data, that information to our audience, and that's where data visualization comes in. This is how we present it in a way that makes sense, that's easy to follow, that tells the story that we're trying to tell, and so on. So let's go ahead and get started. Again, this is going to have 2 videos. This will be the lecture, and then there'll be a separate video where I go over some of the things you'll need to do for your problem set this week. So data visualization, some of the things involved would be creating some sort of table that summarizes the data. Often you'll see charts or graphs that help to make it easy for your audience to interpret what's going on, to learn from the data. Sometimes yourself, it makes it easy. We saw this in module 2 or chapter 2 rather, with the chart that had a scatter plot. Where we had XY coordinates, and it helped to see if there was a trend of some kind. So we can analyze and learn from the data if we can put it into chart form as well. It helps us to identify errors. You can also see, as you're charting these things, where the important relationships lie between two variables that may or may not interact with each other, have an effect on one another. So some overview, some stuff to know. All right, so there is a term you'll see in this book, which I've not seen in any of the other textbooks about data visualization, which is called the data-ink ratio. Data-ink ratio. So this is the proportion of how much of the ink, or part of the visualization, actually helps to convey the meaning of the data, and then how much of that ink is just there, but it actually isn't useful. It doesn't serve a useful purpose. An example of that, here's something with a low data ink ratio. All of these lines in this graph aren't really necessary. They kind of detract from, especially this top left one. Let me turn on my laser pointer, especially this one here. All of these lines don't necessarily aid in any way what is being seen and kind of detract from that. This one's not as egregious as the previous one, but you can see that if we're tracking the sales of this item, this is how it's presented in a table. This is how that same thing is being presented over time, to see that the cycle of it being, the sales are going up near the middle of the month, back down, and then again up at the end of the month. Whatever that is that we're trying to show, there is a cleaner way of doing that. So, deleting the grid lines in this table, for example, the unnecessary horizontal lines. This is cleaner. It's just as easy to read. In fact, more so, because there's nothing taking away from what it is you're trying to see. Now, having it laid out like this probably isn't the best way of presenting it anyway, because you've got days and then sales, days and then sales. So this might be a good place to just have a single vertical line separating day sales 1 through 10 from day sales 11 through 20, just to make sure it's a little easier to follow. So I think one vertical line here would be good, but this is probably much better presented as a time series chart of some kind, like you see in this second image. All right, tables. So tables are one way to lay out the data. If you need to refer to specific numerical values, you would use a table. When you're comparing two values, and if the what's being displayed have different units of measurement. For example, cost and revenues would be one that you'd commonly see. So having costs for each month against the revenues for each month, it could go in this table here, like you see up top. But then you could also have it on the graph, the time series graph on the bottom here, with one being represented by a different, either a color of a line or different design. For example, these dotted lines versus a solid line for revenues and costs. helps to see, are we making more than it's costing us, right? So we've got revenues are higher than what the costs are, but then in month 4, our costs were higher than what we brought in revenues. This also helps to visualize exactly what the difference is. So you have both of these available on a dashboard, which is something you'll see near the end of the lecture. But you have both of these available to see exactly what that amount is, for month 5. Okay, it was exactly, or right about 3,000 units, dollars difference here. You can tell there is a difference in that revenues were lower on month 4 and 5, and then you can look up at 4 and 5 up here to see exactly how much your cost exceeded revenues. So this is one way you can do that. You can combine both of them onto one real clean graph, easily see both of them in one spot. This would be a good visualization for this exact thing. But you can see on the whole for the 6-month period that regardless of the couple months where costs were higher, you did come out ahead by 26.5 thousand, 26,500 roughly on how much you came ahead on revenues. But you see areas of improvement. It started to get a little dicey here in the middle before pulling back up. Sometimes you'll have tables where you have more than, you can't really chart it in a similar manner because the units of measurement aren't conducive to that. So what you have here is you've got the head count. So how many people showed up or how many employees you had or whatever the case was being represented, while the other things are in costs. So while you're also trying to chart month, over month with the revenues and costs, head count wouldn't really fit on a line going across this in any way. So that has to go onto a third line, which could be presented here. So anytime you have making a chart, there's a couple of principles you can adhere to. Vertical lines are typically not good unless they're really necessary, basically, unless you really need to clarify something. So if you recall, I said, maybe you could add some clarity onto this one way back here by adding a single vertical line. That could be helpful, but you didn't need a vertical line down everything. That actually takes away from it. Back to where we're at. Horizontal lines, usually you only want to separate the column titles from the values. So you wouldn't need a horizontal line on every single row. Or if there's a calculation, let's say you have a summary and then a total underneath that, you'd have maybe one line there. Or if you're separating to a new section of data, you could separate it. But when it's several different items that are in the same category, you wouldn't want necessarily a line there underneath that. So here's 4 different tables that show what I'm talking about. So this first one, you have a thick border around every single cell. Okay, this is genuinely awful. Now, if you had a single thick border around the outside of one, that'd be fine. But you don't need every single one of these, separated. I might do something like that on your homework in Excel, but if you were showing this to your audience, your C-suite, you can see the professionalism increasing as this goes on. So the next one is just the same one, but with a thinner line. Okay, a little bit better. Design C puts borders around your cost here and eliminates the horizontal lines underneath. But it doesn't separate out profits. You don't realize that this is costs or revenues minus cost equals your profits, the basic profit formula. And so we've got kind of a flashy design on the bottom right here, which brings it all home to show that the columns are separated by a line, right? So period 1, period 2, period 3, you've got basically this line acting like an underline under each of these numbers. Costs and revenues, and then another thicker line down here because everything at the bottom is the total. So you've got revenues minus costs down here for period 1, and then adding it all up, you've got the total profits 26,460. for all 6 periods combined. So very clean design, very easy to digest what's going on in design D there. All right. When you have a larger table, sometimes it would be nice to have a shading difference. You'll see this a lot in accounting and finance, where you'll have every other column shaded slightly differently. This helps to really easily match up your values. So Waco period 8, be a lot easier to find that by having all your even numbers one shade, all your odd numbers a different shade. And then, totals and costs for each of these down at the bottom. Text values, typically you'll left align the text values. Sometimes I like to right align the totals myself. I think that helps to show that the totals are something different than what's going on with the categories over here. But left align all the way down is pretty good. I like to center align all the values within the cell though. So center align the columns, the word total, but left align or right align. Don't center align these things. All right, cross tabulation. This is when we have 2 variables that are basically being described in some way. You'll see this in a pivot table in Excel. So I'm going to show you what this would look like, and then I'm going to kind of skip through the Excel part of it, or just really gloss through it, because that'll be covered in the other video. So what we have here are 10 different restaurants who were given a quality rating, and then how much was the meal there, and how long did the person wait for that meal, right? You can see large number, 74-minute wait time, but they still rated it as an excellent overall quality rating at the highest price. So to that person, it was worth the long wait, hour and a quarter wait for their meal, and the extra cost per person or whatever. But they were the only one ranked excellent out of these 10. Now, these are just the first 10 listed. This chart, this table, we have to imagine is going on, and this is actually from a 300 samples of LA restaurants. So if we wanted to tabulate all that, one nice way of doing this as a cross tabulation would be to say, okay, here are all of the quality ratings that were rated good, and then within good, how many of those were $10 to $19, $20 to $29, $30 to $39, $40 to $49. So we have categorized them by their costs and then by their quality rating. And we can see, okay, of all the very good restaurants, how many of them were, $10 to $19 meals? Not as many as good. Whereas excellent, you've got, if you want to get an excellent meal, it's more likely you're going to be in the $30 to $49, one of these 2 categories here. So that the left and top margins, they define the classes here. The rows correspond to 3 classes of rating. So quality rating, we're told here, and then that's the good, very good, excellent options. If we wanted to construct this cross tabulation, we would do that by just keep counting. Basically, we would look, okay, all right, this was good, $18. So then I would basically write under good, $10 to $19. I would make a tally mark here if I was doing this by hand. And I would keep doing that all the way through for all 300 of them until I had 42 tally marks under this spot where good and 10, 19 meet. Fortunately, we don't have to do that. We could do a count if function, to find that in Excel. But an easier way to do it would be with a pivot table. So within Excel, if we had this thing, we would just use our on the Insert tab. There's an option called Pivot Table. It looks kind of like this. I'm just going to gloss through it again. You're creating it, and it ends up being that you can set these to a specific value based on meal price and recreate that same thing. Now this is out of based on average wait times. So we can switch easily between average wait times or the restaurant rating, right? So wait times, what percentage of them fell into that category? Here's your count of how many were $10 to $19, right? So what percentage of the whole was this? And then what the believe this was the wait time here. Or highest wait time, perhaps. So we'll see that again in the other video, but this is just a way that you can easily switch between different things. In the other one, we did our tally marks, and then now if we want to do any other calculation, we have to recalculate it by hand. But with the pivot tables, we can make those calculations very easily for ourselves to show several different things. And you can have several pivot tables on one Excel tab if you wanted to, so that it's just showing those things at a glance. But more than likely, you would just have it be dynamic where you just uncheck or recheck or move stuff from columns to rows to values to do that kind of thing. So we'll see that in the next one. Charts. All right, so we're going to look at some types of charts. Charts and graphs sometimes are used interchangeably, depending on exactly what you're showing. Because graph is, graphical representation, I think is what graph is short for, or something thereabouts. So here are some types of charts. So charts, here we go, charts or graphs, yeah. Interchangeably, you can use those. A visual method of displaying the data. It's a graphical representation. So this is how we are showing the data in a table, in a, line chart, bar chart, etc. Scatter chart, that's where you have exactly two quantitative variables, meaning you can do math to them, numerical values, and you're showing the relationship between them, between the X and Y coordinates. And by doing that, you get the ability to see if there's a trend going on or not. So is there a trend going on, yes or no? And that's easily seen on a trend line. Or is there some sort of cycle going on, or seasonal data? Every year in March, we have a lot of sales, right? Whatever that is, maybe in May you sell a lot of pool products and not so much in December, or whatever the case is. A line chart. So a line just connects the different points along the chart. So a scatter plot can be, you can have a line between all the dots, and but typically this will be like a variation on a bar chart. It doesn't necessarily have to the line chart's not necessarily going to be two quantitative variables. It might look like a line chart with a scatter chart when you have an X and Y coordinate, but more than likely the line chart is just some sort of time series data. So in period 1, we had this many sales. In period 2, we had this many sales, and so on. So here's a number of commercials that we ran, and then how much were our sales. Okay, so we ran 2 commercials. We had 50, 100,000. So 5 million. It's in hundreds. Oh, 50, 100. Okay. All right. So 5,000. How many sales we had during that week? All right. So what if we want to know what's the relationship between those? Do we have more in sales if we run more commercials? We can plot those on an XY coordinate. And again, I'll show you how to do this again. We did this in the previous chapter, but we're going to see it a little more clearly and have a little bit more of a focus on it this time around. But, we could see where week 1, if we ran 2 commercials, we had 50,000 in sales, or 5. Very confusing when it's 50 and hundreds. They should have just done this in thousands and said 5 and then 5.7. So 50, 100 would be 5,000. 5,000 in sales, and then if we're in 1 commercial, 4,100 in sales, and so on. But we can see a very clear indication of, as we run more commercials, we sell more products. It doesn't get more linear than that, pretty much. And then so that's easy to tell. You can even quickly add a trend line in Excel to show that line if you're curious if the line presents well or not, and this one clearly does. Monthly sales. So this is it when we're just this would be a standard line chart. Would be a good way to do this. January sales 150, February sales 145, and so on. So we add it to the line chart. This is not a scatter plot, even though it's dots there, because this is not comparing 2 quantitative variables. There's no way to see if a relationship exists between January and 150, but rather is there some sort of cycle in sales. So we see that it goes up and then really sinks to the bottom down in June before somehow jumping back in July. I don't know what this could be in sales, and dips all the way down in June and then in later months, but something, right? It gets up during spring break and then back up again. I'm not sure. But whatever this is that they're selling at Kirkland Industries, which is, I don't know if this is Kirkland, though, Costco brand Kirkland or what, but you can see how looking at a line of this makes it a lot easier to digest than just looking at the dots. You can see some sort of cycle. And if we looked at the previous year and the previous year and the previous year to see if there's the same sort of cycle, then we can start gauging how much our demand is going to be once we hit June, and then see how much it spikes in July. So now maybe we want to see regional sales. So now we're going to break our sales not just into total sales, but how much in north and south regions. Okay, so we can do that with a line chart. We just have to make sure that we show either two different colors or a solid dotted line for that. So south goes down and then back up at the end of the month, whereas north this is dipping down. Not so many sales in the north in November, December, but in the south we do have that. So whatever this product is, if it's too cold, we're not selling anything. But if it's very hot, we're selling a lot of it. So whatever that product is, that's what that could be. Sparkline, pretty similar to a line chart, except a sparkline is a special type that only really exists in Excel. It's just the line only. There's no XY axis. It just gives you a quick glimpse. It's placed inside of a single cell. You can do this by inserting and then clicking on the on Sparkline. And the data will just show us a real quick indication of how the sales look. So you can see this matches that line, but very small. You can see, okay, where's this one's going up, right? So that's all Sparkline is, something slightly different. Really, pretty much would only be used in Excel. It's just the line of the line chart with no dots, no numerical values, no X and Y axis. Bar chart, column chart are basically the same thing, but one is horizontal, one is vertical. You might say a vertical bar chart, but you'll not say a horizontal column chart. Column chart is only going to be vertical bars. It's just really, if you're looking at different categorical variables and you're looking at the count of each of them, this is a very useful way of doing that versus the time series value that you get with a line chart. But maybe you want to know how your sales are between different employees, or sales of different items are in specific. You could track that easily on a bar chart. So this is a bar chart of accounts managed. So you've got your eight employees here, and then how many accounts they manage. Okay. So that's what a bar chart would look like. You could look at that same thing as a column chart, and it would be exactly the same thing, except your X and Y axes would be flipped. Accounts managed would be on the Y, and manager would be on the left there. So you have this data, but maybe we could do a little bit better by sorting these high to low, and that's what you can see here. So same thing, accounts managed, but now we can see who is managing the most, who is managing the least, because maybe we need to assign some new accounts. So we're going to assign them to Williams and Edwards before we assign any more to Gentry. Okay, and here's that image, just a little more clear. So bar chart of accounts managed. You can see this chart along with any charts. If you're going to have a chart, you need to title that chart. If it has an X and Y axis, you need to title that X and Y axis. When you're creating these in Excel, they're not going to come pre-labeled. You'll have to label them. That's important because if you're presenting this, you know what these X and Y axes mean. You know what this chart stands for, but your your manager, your audience, whoever that is, isn't going to know it intuitively. So you do need to make sure they are labeled on any chart you make. Some more charts. All right, pie chart. So another way you can compare categorical data. I'm just going to skip to it real quick, and you can see the same thing we saw on the bar chart, but where whoever has the highest value has the biggest piece of the pie. Gentry was the one with the 37, I think it was, accounts, and then Williams here in yellow and Edwards here in red have the fewest number of accounts that they're managing. A bubble chart. So a bubble chart is a way that you can have three variables on something that is similar to the look of a line chart or a scatter plot, but where that third variable on that line chart has a larger bubble. So you have, maybe sales and revenue or whatever, and then there's some third, or the person here, sales here, and then how many accounts they have. And you want to represent that third thing. That dot, instead of having a dot for them, you just make a larger bubble. The circle just the larger it is, the larger that value. The smaller it is, the smaller that value. And then a heat map. So this is when you have data that the magnitude of it, so how high or low the number is a different color based on what it represents. Maybe a common one might be the higher values are red, the lower values are blue, maybe. So you've got hot, cold, that's why it's called a heat map. But you could have it be green for good, red for bad, or low too. Whatever it is, you've got some sort of variation in the shades or colors to indicate how large that number is. So here's a billionaires per country, right? So billionaires per 10 million residents in the United States. Here's the per capita, median income, and here's the number of total billionaires in the United States. So 3 different values. We want to represent all 3 of those values. We can see billionaires per 10 million, and then per capita income of the people in that country, and then how many total billionaires there are. You can see the United States has the most billionaires per capita, and as a raw number, China, the per capita income of the citizens there, very low, still has the second most number of billionaires, and so on. So 3 different values we want to represent. This is the bubble chart showing that. And then here is a heat map, and then also spark lines at the end. So you can see sales over time. So you can see that that trend is going upwards. Likewise, this negative 2% value is a shade of red, and then this high value is a decent shade of blue. Whereas these very high values of blue show a lot of sales. Yes, the sales looks like it's going up and down, but these sales are better than anywhere else except for this 117% here. So not as, this might look bad that the sales are dipping, but the sales are very strong across the board here in Austin. So there is that combination heat map and spark lines at the end. Some other charts could be a stacked column chart. So you can see 2 values where they relate to the whole. So we had our sales from Kirkland, the South and North region, for example, and you can see total sales represented by the height of the entire column here. This is total sales. However, the red value is what amount of that is just the southern sales and what amount of that is the northern sales. And then you add them both together, you get the total value. So this would probably be a good one to have, maybe a total column here. So 9540, you can see this is right at the 135 mark, or maybe something else is definitely, I think, missing from this, because this could be improved a little bit here. But nice to see. Okay, total sales are great in July, still way higher in the north. Total sales are down in December, but way higher in the South. Useful information if you're, forecasting demand or production needs. We also have clustered column chart and then scatter chart matrix. So let's look at those. So we've got a clustered column chart, which just has them right next to one another. So same idea as this one, except they're not stacked. They are clustered together. So south and north, and you might have several categories. You might have north, south, east, and west, all in one cluster for January. Same thing here with the stacked column chart. You might have 4 different categories or more. You get much more than that. It might get a little confusing, but you could stack 4 different ones on top of each other with a total as well. Multiple column charts just means that you have a separate column chart for each. Probably better if they are quantitative and not categorical. This is just a count of whatever, but if this time series was, if this wasn't a time series chart and you were comparing 2 things, probably you'd want to make a separate one for each. Data for New York sub-boroughs. So we have here a listing of the 55 sub-boroughs within New York. You know, you've got the 5 boroughs there, and then these are sub-boroughs within there. Monthly median rent. What percentage of the people living there are college graduates? What is the poverty rate there, and what's the time travel maybe to their job, I guess, probably. And we can do a scatter chart matrix if we want to examine the relationship between those variables. What do I mean by scatter chart matrix? Well, I'm glad you asked. Here it is right here. And what we have is basically your median rent to median rent. So you can see where two things match up. So if you wanted to compare median rent to college graduates, that's going to be here. If you wanted to compare poverty rate to what you can see here, if you're comparing the same thing to itself, it's going to always be a line. It's going to have all of the rents lowest to highest. So basically, this whole diagonal you're ignoring because you're not comparing two things. You're just looking at the median rent. So in all cases, I mean, the only thing you're seeing is that the number of college graduates is on the lower, not the higher. And so less than half of them are college graduates, it appears. Whereas poverty rate, it looks like a pretty even split. About half of them are in poverty, half of them are not. Commuter time, all of them have a high commute time. Median rent, way more than half are below the median, apparently. But where it's useful is saying, okay, we want to compare commute time to poverty rate. There's no real trend there, okay? Median rent that people pay compared to college graduates. The people that have a lower, lower rent are probably not college graduates. They're living in a less affluent area. The college graduates have a higher rent because they maybe are more affluent and have that, but there's fewer of them. So it's ways to look for any kind of trend between two things. So yeah, that's a scatter chart matrix. All right, we're going to skip that. We'll come back to that. You'll see that pivot table, ways you can make some pretty cool pivot tables and pivot charts. So combine that into one in Excel. And then I'm going to go over this only briefly, these advanced data visualizations, because we're not probably going to do any work over them per se, but you might have a question as to which type of chart would you use in certain situations. Parallel coordinates plot, especially, we are not going to be using because it looks like this. And I don't want to do that. I don't want you guys to have to do that either. This is like home run, single base, first base. I'm not really sure what's going on. That's a little too complicated. But if you are examining data with more than two variables, you can draw a line between the different coordinates on that to show a representation between them. So if you're asked which one of these would you maybe use for examining data with more than two variables, where the height of the line represents the value by that observation, etc., maybe one of these things would apply to potentially a multiple choice question, but I'm not going to have you do any problems over this section right here. Very confusing. A tree map. So if you wanted to look at data along multiple dimensions, you could look at a tree map. Again, if you were given an image of something and you're asked what kind of chart is this, it's a tree map, and that's about as far as it would go. But you can see, this is like consumer goods. Let's see if I can have some notes here over that. So this is a map of the entire market. You've got healthcare, hard to read. It's a little blurry. Sorry about that. Consumer goods, technology, and within that, you can see how many of the stocks are fall under technology, and all the ones that fall under technology, you can see, okay, Apple has the biggest share here. And then if you clicked on any one of these, this is very specific type of visualization software, but you would basically click on any one of these individual boxes or hover over them, and you would see some sort of change in the market. If something's going up, this would tell us that oil and gas, whoever the biggest player in this is, has no change, but overall looks to be down, a lot more red, meaning that whatever this one is, which we can't read, not technology, but whatever that one is down, technology stocks are more green, so that one is up, and so on. So tree map, and that's about all you need to do that. We're not going to make a tree map. Graphical information systems, this is the type of, this is where you overlay values over a map. These are very neat. These are good for some things and not good for other things, but here's one where you can see, okay, we want to know where the Cincinnati Zoo members live, right? Cincinnati Zoo is located here, and we can see, okay, a lot of them live in this area, a lot of them live in this area. Why is that important? Maybe we concentrate our mailers for rewards of some kind to these areas where we have more members, because something about these areas is attracting people to the zoo. Maybe it's their income. Who knows what it is, but maybe we take the other route with our marketing team and we say, okay, we're not getting anybody from New Richmond. Maybe we can attract them. There's a new audience there we're missing out on. We haven't done a good enough job of advertising to South Lebanon here or Oxford. Maybe we can send out some mailers over there or get a hold of them. But whatever it is we want to know, that we can react to that based on population data by overlaying by county or city, whatever this map is representing specifically, but it helps us to know our audience. Finally, data dashboard. So this is where you have several metrics that you can view at one time. This is very helpful with key performance indicators. So data dashboard, multiple metrics, and automatically updates these metrics as new data becomes available. So there are some visualization software tools such as Tableau and Power BI that are known for this, creating dashboards, Tableau especially being the big one, with Power BI really creeping up the market share to nearly even the split as far as what businesses use one or the other. A lot of businesses don't use both, and they both have their pros and cons, but you can have several different things going on at once, and as the data gets updated, you're able to quickly see that in real time, or with a quick update to drill down into one thing of information versus another. Let's take a look at what that might look like, just to help you visualize it. So you've got several different charts. You've got call volume, you've got time breakdown during this shift. How many unresolved cases do we have? What's the call volume per city on our 3 major cities here in Texas? How long did it take to resolve a case? Under 2 minutes was the biggest one. Great. We had, an outlier here that took us 32 more minutes, nothing in this range, but it helps you to see several things at once in one area called the dashboard, right? So some principles: you should be able to provide timely information on whatever key performance indicators are important to who the user is. All those KPIs should be on a single screen that you can scan and easily tell what's going on, convey whatever the meaning is to its user, and whatever is related to the decisions that user makes. So not every dashboard is going to be appropriate for every member of your company, but your operations team needs to know certain things, your marketing team needs to know certain things, your accounting and finance team needs to know certain things. So have these be customized to the user. If there's anything unusual that requires attention, this should be seen in this area. We had a couple of calls that took more than 32 minutes. We should go investigate what was going on with those. Is this a new employee? Is this a seasoned employee? Is this a specific account? We should go investigate that, right? So use a restrained amount of color. Definitely use color if there's different categorical variables, right? So email, internet, software, 3 different lines, but we don't have, the background colored in, right? We don't have, all of these numbers on the X and Y axes colored in, right? We're using a very tasteful amount of color that's serving a specific purpose. Email, internet, software, idle time, 4 different colors, okay? Houston, Dallas, and Austin are, we look at email, internet, software by city. So we use the same colors we used here. So be consistent: email, internet, software, being consistent with those colors all the way throughout. time to resolve a case. Maybe this could be, where we've got lighter colors when they are in this area, maybe a green, yellow, red situation, wherever the case is. So that's dashboards. That is going to be chapter 3 as far as our lecture goes. We'll see you in the practice problems and guided practice video. Thanks, everyone.